Welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon. I'm a retired New York City police detective with 20 plus years of law enforcement. And guys and girls, if you like all things true crime related from a police perspective, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you will get all things Crime Time with DutyRon when I go live or when I upload another video. And tonight we're going to go into domestic violence in the wake of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. As we know, this case has shocked the world. It's been broadcast all over the place, and it has brought heightened attention to domestic violence. And tonight I have two very esteemed guests who I'll introduce to you later on in the show. But right now I'm going to be putting, and this is going to stay down there, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And I want that to be clear and evident for any and all folks who need that resource. We're going to be talking about resources. We're going to be talking about all things domestic violence tonight with two very, very esteemed guests. But before we get into it, I want to say a special thank you to my Patreon supporters, the channel members, and all of the folks who positively interact in all of these live streams. You're an intricate part of the success of Crime Time with DutyRon. And I have to say, I tip my cap to each and every one of you for positively interacting and leaving comments down below in the comments section. Without you guys and your interaction, we really don't have anything. And there's my good friend and neighbor, Diane B. from across the street. Our good friend, criminal defense attorney Joe Murray is here, and lots of first-time viewers. So welcome to Crime Time with DutyRon. But before we get going, I want to play a little bit of media. This media will just set up what Ed and myself are going to talk about tonight. Domestic violence as it pertains to Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, their relationship. And we're going to go forward and we're going to watch this little piece of media, and then I'll introduce my guests.
Continue analyzing Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie's final encounters laid out on social media and in police body cam video. We're letting a local domestic violence expert weigh in. And as Tony Ann Torrens tells us, this is just one devastating example of violence that happens everywhere, every day.
With her being so visible with social media and all, that it brings domestic violence to the front of a lot of conversations.
Penelope House Executive Director Tony Ann Torrens believes Gabby Petito's disappearance and now homicide case has gained national attention because of the trail of social media Petito and fiance Brian Laundrie left for their followers. But she says the alleged domestic violence between the couple happens daily.
Domestic violence definitely knows no boundaries, and it can happen to anybody, any race, any culture, any socioeconomic status, any level of education.
This body camera video from Utah police has been viewed millions of times. Police pulled the couple over after a 911 call that Laundrie hit Petito. When police spoke to the couple separately, they noticed scratch marks on Laundrie. Torrens says police have a very tough job to do in these situations.
Law enforcement does have a difficult job determining who is the primary aggressor. You know, was the victim acting in self-defense? And therefore you will see marks on the perpetrator. And
take a look at this clip when officers first approached the van. There's speculation Petito could have been doing this violence at home signal for help.
It's very hard to look in those recordings what's actually going on. It's kind of frantic. So, I mean, you can probably read into it, you know, what you want to read into it as far as what she may or may not have done. But the bottom line is I think people need to understand, once again, that there is a lot of domestic violence in our communities, and often the domestic violence escalates to a situation where there is a homicide.
Now, police have not confirmed if that was the signal she was using, but if you are in a domestic situation, this is the signal that you can use to alert police if you're in danger. You first put your thumb down and then your fingers follow on top. And if you are a victim of domestic abuse, Torrens says to get out when it is safe to do so.
So that's a bit of valuable information, and we're going to talk to our guests about it. Adding now into the stream, my co-host and a good friend. He's a crime scene unit retiree, first grade detective from the NYPD, Ed Wallace, a fan favorite. Thank you so much for being here, Ed. How are you this evening?
Good evening, Ron. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's an important show that we are doing here tonight, and I've wanted to do this for such a long time, but we had such a busy October, a very busy October. That's my African gray parrot. He is making whistling noises. I don't know why he's doing it. He normally doesn't do it, but he's having a good time in the back.
The security detail is happy tonight.
It's Popeye, the 33-year-old African gray. He's making fun of me and whistling at me. So it's all good. You know, these things happen every once in a while. So we got a great live stream. It's going to be action-packed with a lot of information for our listening audience. Domestic violence is no joke. And we saw this with Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, but there's hundreds of millions of victims that are out there of all races, shapes, sizes, colors, creed. It knows no boundaries, domestic violence. And I think it's very important for us to speak about this. October was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but as you and I spoke about this, every day is Domestic Violence Awareness Day. So we need to, shout this out from the rooftops. My next guest is a 30-year police veteran. She's Captain Donna Roman Hernandez. She's retired. Captain Donna Roman Hernandez served 30 years in law enforcement. She is in the patrol division of Essex County Police and Caldwell Police Department in New Jersey. She retired at the rank of a captain, and she's second in command in the Caldwell Police Department when she was active. And she commanded the domestic violence response team. That's an amazing position to be in. Donna was a domestic violence trainer with the New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice, Office of the Attorney General. She's also is domestic violence and a sexual assault expert and a trauma-informed response trainer. Donna's a speaker with the Equal Justice USA's Trauma Healing Network. She's the founder and CEO of Violence Intervention and Prevention Specialist and Blue Force Films. Her memoir, Battered Blue, will be published soon, and we all look forward to that. I will link everything. DonnaHernandez.com is her website. Donna, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us tonight for this very, very important conversation.
Thank you so much, Ron, for the opportunity. Happy to be here.
And Donna, an impressive resume as a police captain in our neighboring state, our tri-state areas, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. As a tri-state law enforcer, could you just give the audience just a little bit of your background? I know that I just gave a brief overview, but just give them your background and some of your skill set.
Well, I started in law enforcement in the 1980s when there were very few women or Hispanics on the job. I started out with the Essex County Police, unfortunately, due to layoffs. I then was a police officer with the Caldwell Police Department, where I did more than 25 years on the job there and retired as a captain after 30 years on the job.
That's impressive. So you've seen quite a bit of domestic violence over your time as a police officer. Do you want to tell the audience just a tad bit about some of your experience and what you maybe went through personally yourself? Because your story is fascinating, and I think everyone needs to hear it.
Unfortunately, in my household, my father was on the job as well as a public safety officer with the Essex County courts. And he had a history in his family of domestic violence, and that carried through, unfortunately, as I said, within our family. So myself and my siblings and my mother were victims of his violence, not only violence, but mental abuse as well, for over 3 decades. It started out as child maltreatment. I was not only a direct victim, but I was also vicariously impacted by being a bystander. So it's complex trauma over 3 decades. And as my siblings left, I stayed. I actually stayed in that household while I was on, had come on the job. So to protect my mother.
Wow.
And a terrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, I watched some of your videos and I looked at some of your, your writings, and I went over to your website, and when I look at it, I said to myself, how does she have the strength to do this? But you find the strength within yourself, and you go out there and you teach people how not to become a victim of domestic violence. Now, Donna, if you could, I don't know how this comes into play, but this domestic violence sign that they showed us, is that something that's taught in the classroom? Do you want to speak a little bit about that, and some of the sticking points, or some of the things that you can give out to our listening audience?
I've not seen that in any of the trainings that I've been involved with, but I think it's a great mechanism to use. Anything that gives a victim an edge or a tool in their resources is very important. So I fully endorse that. I find it to be something very simply done. However, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. Some people will never talk about it. Some people are so under the control and power of the batterer that they don't have the forewithal to do that.
Right.
Silence does not equal compliance. That's what I teach. Because a victim is silent doesn't mean they want to be compliant. Most times it's out of fear of being killed, like in my situation.
Right. And we have many of our people live chatters here. There's almost 1,000 folks in the chat. Many have been or are victims themselves, and many are maybe perhaps going through it now. So we're going to talk about a lot of different aspects here tonight. And Joe Murray, our retired NYPD police officer and criminal defense attorney, says, please don't promote the idea of making a fist towards a cop during a domestic dispute. Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many teachings that are out there, and I'm not an expert in domestic violence. I could say that I have responded to tens of thousands. Thank you for that super chat, Joe, by the way. I responded to tens of thousands probably over the time in the 7-5 precinct and in housing PSA 2. Domestic violence was, a job and a call that we went out on quite a bit. So I'm definitely not an expert in the training and in the prevention, but I am certainly someone who's responded to lots and lots of domestic violence calls. I can remember a particular case where I've been out 5 or 6 times to the same home. Person got an order of protection against her significant other, and the last and final time we went there, she had numerous stab wounds to her back, and we took a order of protection out of her pocket. She died. So a very, very terrible situation that I'll never forget, and that was during my patrol days, and very shocking to see that, because a piece of paper is not going to, as save you from a violent person. It is a tool in law enforcement and the criminal justice system, but a tool is a tool. Ed, you have any questions for Donna before we bring in Connie?
Well, I was just amazed in doing the research for the program that as we're sitting here, every minute, 20 people are being physically abused by their intimate partner in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shocking figure. I had that written down on my pad. You beat me to it, and I'm glad that you did your research. But I have it down here on the pad, and I was going to talk to Connie. My next guest is a return visitor. Connie is from the Civilian Corrections Academy. She's awesome. We had her on with the Chris Watts Dodge Correctional Facility live stream we did. Connie, thank you so much for taking out the time on a Monday night. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to be here. Your audience is awesome. I'm looking at these comments, and just to see how many people have been impacted by domestic violence on some level is just amazing.
Yeah, I want you to please just let the folks know some of your experience in the domestic violence arena. So if you could just let them know what you did for you were the former director at Safe Horizon. So I'm going to go full screen with you and just let them know what you've done.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Connie Aline. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. I'm also a contributor to Tier Talk, so I want to shout out Anthony Ganji because, you know, his partnership has been just really great. As far as my work, so most of you, I don't know how many remember, I know you got a lot of new people on. So I started my correctional journey on Rikers Island back in 2000. And when I left Rikers Island, I actually decided I wanted to work with a different demographic. And I ended up going into the domestic violence world. Initially, I thought, you know what, this will be great. This is just the same population you were working with, but on the outside. And it was just very eye-opening. One, I think, to walk into the shelter system. So I worked for Safe Horizon, and I would not, state which facility I was the director for, because that information has to remain confidential from the perspective of, individuals who have safety plans, and their safety plans include going into a shelter for safety. We never give an address or name the name of an actual shelter, but I was in New York City and working in there, really, I'm listening to Donna talk about just the vicarious trauma. And prior to us starting, it was really thinking just the amount of trauma, not even being the actual victim, but seeing people come into the shelter system in probably one of the lowest points of life, I think is one of those things that you can never unsee. And it's an experience that keeps you in tune with what's really going on in the environment. And as we talked about the impact of COVID and, folks being isolated, possibly with their abusers, the numbers continue to grow. And as I'm looking at this now, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation because, it isn't just the Gabbies, right? There are so many victims of domestic violence. And so it's great that we're having this conversation.
Yes, Connie. And on the phone, you and I spoke about this, and I see Donna shaking her head. Listen, this conversation and this domestic violence knows no boundaries. Okay, so when we have a case like Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie out in the public eye, it is something that I feel, and we spoke about this on the phone, Connie. I think everybody deserves this attention, but unfortunately, not everybody gets it. Gabby Petito's own father, Joe, at a press conference said, "That's on you," and he pointed to the press. And I was so proud of him to do that because he could have been selfish and said, "You know what? This is my daughter, so be it." He didn't do that. He went and he said right to the people that are standing right in front of him, he said, "This is on you guys because you control this, not me, not anybody else. You control whenever you put the story out." But Connie, I wanted to ask you, the Safe Horizons facility that you ran, I know that it's, there's lots of HIPAA laws and privacy, but it was primarily a facility that was there for domestic violence victims and their children.
Yes.
There's a difference, right, between a battered woman shelter and a housing unit, family housing facility. You want to talk just a tad bit about that?
Sure. So this facility specifically for women and children, because one, it's established to ensure that once the children come into shelter, that they have a safe place to be. And two, there are wraparound services that are provided to those women and those children. So, at some point, we make sure they get into medical. We make sure if they have to go to court that they're getting into court. But we also had services specifically for children who were going to school. So if a child in this safety plan now needed to be set up in the school within this district, then we made the arrangements to make sure that was happening. And for those children who were not school age, this particular shelter actually had on-site daycare so that mom could still go and handle all of the legal court matters, anything else outside while baby was still home safe. So, it's understanding that there are different options available and that you're never alone if you are going through any situation like this. Now, I think the bigger challenge really is just capacity, right? Many of the facilities are full capacity. And so being able to get in and get that plan in place and really be, how do I say it? Like, so we didn't have a waiting list per se. What we would try to do is get as many people in as possible, and we'd always try to make sure there was always an open space available. But as the numbers grew, sometimes capacity is the challenge. And so part of that safety plan is also making sure that you're able to communicate with other shelters. So like if someone came to me, and we would try to make sure they didn't come to us if we didn't have room, we were already planning for them to be safe someplace else.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, that's important to communicate with the various shelters to find out what everybody else's needs are. Like, in other words, yeah, that's a great thing to bring up. And some of the folks in the chat mentioned, what about pets? When people like just leave or get out of their house, they bring pets with them. That's a whole nother challenge. But you know, the main focus is providing housing for the women, the victims, and their children. So it is, you know, very important that these resources are in place. Now, I wanted to get into some of the warning signs. You know, I know there is, you know, there's steps and there's a process that we go through when we talk about domestic violence. So this is straight off of the hotline, domestic violence hotline. They talk about the warning signs and know what to look for. Donna, you want to walk us through a little bit of this? I mean, again, like I said, I'm not the expert here, so that's why I'm relying on you guys to help us out.
I would say the warning signs can be very direct. They could be suppressed. I mean, it's really on an individual basis. I don't want to just say categorically a victim presents in a certain way, because I'm the poster child for someone who never presented in a way that would give secrets. I think it's important to stress also that victimization is not only a singular problem, it impacts the entire family. So there are some people that are vicariously impacted by it that will speak out on behalf of the victim. And it may take years. For me, it was over 30 years of keeping everything quiet.
Yeah.
So it's really a mixed bag of a whole lot of emotions. If someone is terrorized emotionally, is that worse than someone who is battered? I mean, I don't think there's a chart that ranks which is worse. For my mother, for example, psychological abuse was worse than any physical abuse that she ever endured. So it's not that it's a case by case basis, but not every victimization is the same.
Right.
And
I wanted to point out too, Donna, not to cut you off. You know, again, we look at the stats, and I'll bring up the stats and the figures. Women aren't the only ones that are victims of domestic violence. Men are victims as well.
Yes.
I believe it's 1 out of every 20 men become a victim of domestic violence at any particular time. And then I think it's 1 out of every 4 women. So higher percentage of women become victims of domestic violence, but the numbers don't lie. And we're looking over the numbers, and, you know, Connie, I wanted to ask you, you know, we talked about corrections and some of the domestic violence that goes on behind the walls in a correctional facility. I don't want to get into that here, but that's a whole nother show down the road with you and Anthony. But you know, what's your experience with domestic violence when it comes to men? Is it a different aspect? Is it different than what we see here about control? How does that work? I mean, I feel like, you know, and the common folk would say, well, men are stronger than women. I mean, how does that happen? You know, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here.
So I think that's where a lot of the shame comes in. You know, men don't come forward as often as women do. And it's because of that stigma that, oh, men should be able to handle it, or how is he being abused by a woman, or people will question whether or not the abuse is happening. Based on my experiences, I've talked to men who've been more so the emotional abuse, Like, so being with a woman who's abusive of their children and not really knowing how to get custody, or not feeling like they're able to get custody because the courts, in their perspective, the courts were not as friendly to men as they were to women. So they didn't feel that they had the right to come forward. There were instances where I talked to men who felt like if they were to do anything, that the woman was going to turn it around on them, right? Like, if I come forward, the woman's going to say that I'm actually the abuser, whereas she's the one who's doing it. So I think the way it presents may be different,
Right.
but it's still a level of control that's being exerted on someone else. And whether it's based on emotion, or it's based on finance, or it's based on children's safety, there's still ways that men are being abused. And this is not to say they aren't being physically abused, because I've seen that as well. It's just understanding that we've got to be open to knowing that abuse is gender neutral,
Right.
right? Like, I think that's the only way that I can say that.
Mhm.
If someone is somehow being manipulated, or there's some sort of leverage being held over men, and we see it with women all the time, so I'm not saying it doesn't happen both ways, but usually with men, I've not experienced as much of the physical abuse of men. I've seen it more so in the form of, a woman having a different level of leverage over the man that emotionally or mentally incapacitates him.
Gotcha. Yeah, well put there, Connie. And I just brought up, as we were speaking, the domestic violence fact sheet. It says on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 4 women. Wow, I got a pretty gosh darn good memory. And 1 in 9. What did I say? 1 in 10 or 1 in 20? So I was a little wrong on that one. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. Intimate partner contact, sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking, with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contracting of sexually transmitted disease, etc. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. This includes in a range of behaviors like slapping, shoving, pushing, and in some cases might not be considered domestic violence. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner, and 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner. Data is unavailable on male victims. So this is shocking bits of data here. I mean, if I didn't look into this, I would not know these figures, and these figures are staggering.
Ron,
I
if I may,
yeah, go ahead, Donna. Go.
Those numbers are probably very low because of the non-reported indigenous populations, non-documented individuals, and I respect those numbers because at least they set a parameter of the types of people that are reporting and what they're reporting, and I think it's very helpful. But the numbers are I'm sure much higher because of what I've just said, and it's when it's reported also. It may take time, so it could be 10 years, and then those numbers would all of a sudden increase because of the timetables of when people report and when they don't report. I respect, you mentioning all those numbers, but I just wanted the audience to know that they're much higher.
Oh, absolutely. And with COVID-19 and everybody being on lockdown and inside their homes and apartments, these numbers are much higher because people are even afraid to make a phone call. You can't even get out and sneak out to make a call. Hey, I just wanted to go to the chat for a minute. Super chats came in from a few people, but Timmy Acosta, a great friend of ours, sends in a $10 super chat and says, "What is the main reason victims don't reach out for help?" ? There are a lot of resources available that go unused. Very good question, Timmy. Connie, I'll let you take that one, and then I'll go over to Donna.
Sure. So people are afraid, right? Like, so, you can say, yes, we're going to create this safety plan for you. But, even in the creation of a safety plan, there's still that fear that that person is still able to get in contact with them, still able to find them some way, somehow. I think there's also that embarrassment. Sometimes people just don't want to come forward and admit that they have been living with this abuse for whatever period of time that they've been living with that abuse. A lot of times people feel guilty that they stayed so long, or they feel like they're being judged by the folks who they're going to help for, right? And so it's not a matter of judgment. I want to say that that's probably one of the most judge-free spaces you can enter into if you're trying to get out of an abusive relationship. But for the most part, those are the reasons why people hesitate. And then sometimes there are those instances where there is sort of that financial leverage, right? So in situations, I worked with a woman who, she was a dentist, but her husband controlled the finances. And so she stayed in the situation because her working as a dentist, her salary was paying for their son to be in private school. It was like all this goodness happening, except he was the one in control. And so she said if she left, she'd have no money, right? Wow. Or she'd no longer have her home. It was like, this is why she stayed. And then finally, the abuse was so bad. When she got out with her son, she was okay not having any money. It was just like, enough is enough.
Wow. Crazy. Donna, I'm going to let you take this next super chat. It comes in from Pooh's Blustery Day. Thank you for the super chat. She says, how can we best support? ? Donation, time, money, supplies. Donna, your thoughts on that?
We can best support through awareness and prevention. Getting the word out that as you're doing on your show today is very important. There are many people that they think they're alone, that no one else is going through what they're going through. And that loneliness just keeps people silent and compliant. The prevention piece is what all these, the coalitions, New Jersey Battered Women's Coalition, all the coalitions across the United States, the advocates, knowing that there is confidentiality, that whatever is told to an advocate or whatever is expressed to someone in a position to help them, those are the things. That's the support that they need. Sure, we need to finance our advocacy groups as well, because there's been so many cuts for monies to support these groups. So all of those things, and especially the things that Connie has mentioned, that we have to take the stigma away. It's not okay to be abusive. Abuse is not love. Violence is not the answer to solving relationship issues, because it's about relationships and human behavior. If we could change human behavior, modify the way people think about violence, how they perpetrate violence, we would have a great world. However, just the opposite has been happening over the last few years. We have seen violence glorified. It's very masculine to do it, and things of that nature.
It's in our music, it's in our video games, and such cultures are flocking to these things and this lifestyle, and it's wrong. None of it is correct, and it comes back to parenting skills. Keep knowing what your children are watching on the internet and what they're doing with these video games, and the music they're listening to, and understanding that and teaching your children this is not acceptable.
Yeah, it comes from within the home, and if they're not getting guidance there, then it's a situation that may spiral out of control. Joe Murray sends in a super chat, and I want you to take this one, Ed, because he is one of our brothers in blue, a former retired police officer and now criminal defense attorney. He says, the law already punishes mandatory reporters, cops, teachers, doctors, nurses, who fail to report suspected child abuse. Why not extend it to mandatory reporting of suspected domestic violence? Amen to that, Joe Murray.
I know at the college level, we have Title IX, and if you're an employee of a college, you have to report if it comes to your attention, and failure to report will get you fired.
Correct. Connie, how is it over there in the corrections department? Is there anything?
I mean, we're first responders, and we're mandatory reporters of everything. So, anything we know, we need to come forward. I think one of the challenges in corrections, though, I mean, if it's an officer having that experience at home, you know, there's some hesitation to come forward, you know, because you may lose, you know, use of your firearm, right? There may be some questions about your rank and your authority in that space. You know, the way your colleagues engage with you may be a little different, right? Because of that. So, you know, I think there's a sensitivity surrounding domestic violence and the way it's approached as an employee. And then from the perspective of there being any inmate violence, like, I mean, that's the nature of the beast. We kind of just got to deal with it as it comes.
Lisa Lee, I can't agree with you more, Connie. I'm leaving you on the screen for this one. Lisa Lee says, stop it before it starts. It's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Amen to that, sister. Amen to that. In the private chat, Roro from Bakersfield, California, she says, love the topic, and domestic violence is a major issue. She's from Bakersfield, California. She's part of Orrin and Orson West. Let me get Connie off because she's like, DutyRon, what are you doing to me? Roro says she loves the topic. Domestic violence is a major issue. I was a part of Angel Lee's event, spreading domestic violence awareness. Angel Lee is one of her good friends, and I am going to get together and talk to her because I want to try to do some fundraising and some charitable events for some of these shelters and folks who are doing God's work with domestic violence. I want to try to raise some funds for people who really need it. And Connie, I know that you could talk on this, and I know Donna can as well. Money is not an unlimited resource when you talk about domestic violence. And if you do it as a 501c, or if you do it as a private organization, you depend on donors. You depend on people to donate money. Donna, you want to talk a little bit about that? I don't know how much or how well versed you are in that fundraising part, but money makes these programs go. Are they all funded by the government, or is it subsidized? How does that work?
I don't know how they work. I do know that there have been many cutbacks because I'm very involved in the advocacy world. So,
okay.
But I'm not familiar with how they're funded.
Connie, can you speak on that?
Sure. So we would get funding from the government. We'd get funding from local businesses. We would get funding from sometimes, like, so for example, Paul Mitchell would send like hair dryers, you know, Johnson and Johnson would send over products. We'd get stuff from, like, we'd get diapers. There was at the time a baby buggy, right? They'd send stuff over for kids. So we get tons and tons of donations. And then even for like the holiday time, we get like all the Secret Santa stuff brought in for the kids and for the moms, right? For who needed to feel some kind of joy during a time that, you know, they were feeling a bit hopeless. So we would get funding from everywhere, and we would get donations from so many different places.
Wow. And speaking of donations, I want to say thank you to Denise Spalding, who is a fantastic DutyRon Crime Time member. She is a generous donor. She sends in $100 super chat, and she says, I've played the role of an advocate many times. May all of the survivors find strength and know their worthiness. It's so very important as their children are learning from the environment that they live in and day out. Educate, educate, educate. Denise, I love you. I thank you for that message. It is an important message. And thank you so much for your generosity. What a great statement right there. So thank you, Denise. Tip my cap to you. I want to show just a little statistic here for the state of New York. I'm going to go full screen with this. We're all still audio on. Domestic violence in New York. And I don't know how good you guys can see that. Let me know in the chat if you could see this really good by putting a 1 in the chat. If you can see it well. If not, from my vision impaired, I'll make it even more magnifying. But I want to go over these figures. They're astronomical. And this is as of 2021, March of 2021. 31.7% of New York women and 29% of New York men experience intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking. These are sort of the same verbiage that I read before. But in 2018, New York City law enforcement responded to 250,000 domestic violence incident reports. That's just in the 5 boroughs, folks. That's in New York City alone. Okay, that's in New York, Queens County, New York County, Bronx, Staten Island, and Queens. So it says also to police outside of New York responded to 182,893 domestic incidents. So look at the figures in the 5 boroughs in the NYPD where Ed and I worked. There was 250,000 domestic violence incident reports. But police outside of New York City, all of police combined, responded to 182,893 domestic incidents. That's a staggering number within New York City. And I brought up that point because I did speak to my guests about this. New York City and the 5 boroughs is, 9 million people reside in Manhattan alone. So the numbers are staggering. There's a lot of people living in a very small area, but there were 59 intimate partner homicides in New York City in 2018, compromising 44% of female victims and only 2% male. And I said only 2% because I'm comparing it to 44, not that I'm, putting down the percentage for men. I know I'm going to get crap for that anyways. Male victims, 16 years of age or older. So that 2% of male homicide victims are 16 years of age and older. 40% were committed, these homicides, 40% of them were committed using a firearm. So that's what I want to talk about, Donna and Connie. When we're talking about violence with firearms, with knives, these numbers don't lie. An overwhelming majority of domestic violence incidents involve some type of weapon. What kind of safety measures, what kind of things can we recommend to these folks that, and besides getting out and getting yourself safe? Again, this is not a tactics course. We're not trying to teach tactics to people, but if you're in a situation where someone's threatening your life and you know there's a weapon in the house, you got to do the best that you can to get yourself out of there. And I know it's easier said than done, and it's hard for folks to do this, but you get the chance, you got to get out. And when we hear people talk about if you get the chance and get out, what is that chance? Is that chance when someone's sleeping and you run out the door? Connie, you were a director at the Safe Horizons. Did you have people running out and banging on the door at Safe Horizons and saying, "Hey, I need to get away from the situation"?
So the safety plan is very real, right? It's very real and it's very practical. And so the expectation is that now we say this isn't like a how-to, right? So I'm not trying to teach anyone the strategy or tactics or what have you, but so in many states, there's a mandatory cool-off period, right? And so if there's been a situation, law enforcement has been called to your residence for a domestic situation, the person who is the perpetrator, technically in that 72-hour period, should be removed, right? They would be in jail, in custody, something for at least 72 hours. And so what we would try to do is to help folks. If you've got that window where you know that you're safe, here's what the plan is. So if it's so the safety plan, I think I had a copy of a safety plan. So like when it's actually actively happening, right? Like certainly you're trying to wait for that person, for the tensions to sort of decrease.
Cool off.
You need the tensions to cool off a bit, right? And so that the incident has happened. And so I've had people who said like they're texting their loved ones, right? They would text like the sister, the cousin, the brother, someone to let them know that this was happening. And then after they sent the text, that sibling would then call the police and send them to the home. And in instances where you don't have access to the phone, the safest way is to try to get out while that person is asleep. But strategically, what we talk about is making sure your bag is packed, making sure you know where your keys are, making sure all the things that in a rush you might panic and forget.
Right.
Even if you just need to put a little something together and tuck it away somewhere, this is where it's at. And when that person is asleep, or when they're drunk, right, and they're knocked out, or they're high and they're knocked out, like, because in many instances, substance abuse or substances are an actual part of what's driving some of the violence, right? And so if you take the opportunity to get out when that person is not at their heightened state of violence,
Right.
it allows you to plan along the way. So one thing that we would do is say, okay, so if you could get out today, what would you need? Right. And so we go through the what you need. Okay, great. So now put together what you need. What else do you think you want to do before you leave that home? Right. Because the safety of it is we want to get out when you're not under attack. We want you to get out when that person is going to the store, they're going to work for the day. Whatever is taking them away from you, that's giving you the ability to kind of
I had to do it.
it's giving you the ability. Sorry guys, it was not funny that
Anthony popped into your screen.
But it is creating that plan and making sure that you have what you need, so that one, you're prepared, right? Because that's the most important part of it. And two, whatever those extra things you need, right? Like, so maybe that's the time where you have an extra set of keys. Maybe you've taken the time in preparing, right, to open up a savings account for yourself that that person may not know about, because you've got a couple of dollars that you want to put away in preparation for this exit strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really, for me, that was important because, again, like I said, I'm not teaching domestic violence. I know you don't teach it, but you've been around it so long. So these messages, this plan of action is important. So if you are a victim of domestic violence, you have a plan. You have a plan. And so many people don't really get a chance to sit down and have these steps explained to them because their heads are all over the place. They're just trying to keep themselves alive. And I get it. I want to play just actually 3 pieces of media. They're only 1-minute clips. These are 3 different people's stories being told, and it's a male and 2 females. I want you to see this because it's going to show you how it's so diverse of how domestic violence affects people. So let me play this piece of media while everyone takes a little bit of a break. And I will add this to the screen. And Connie, you can gather your thoughts, and we won't put any more Anthony's super chats on the screen.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. This is JR's story.
When I think of my story and the experiences that I've had in my life, they automatically believe that it begins on the 5th of April of 2003 when I was injured in Iraq. But I have a whole set of challenges that existed prior to that I faced as a young boy. My mother, unfortunately, got into relationships, one of them being incredibly abusive. The only way that we inform a society that has had no interaction or relationship with this topic is we need more stories. There's no shame in speaking up. There's no shame in saying, right now, I don't know the answers. Right now, I feel incredibly weak. Right now, I feel incredibly helpless. There's no shame in that at all. When you come out, you think you're going to be the only one and the whole world is going to have a lens on you. And the reality is there's so many of us out there that have lived through what you're living through. There's so many of us out there that have no idea what you've been through, but we're willing to be here to support you, to love you, to embrace you, and to encourage you. There are advocates at the National Domestic Violence Hotline ready to help you. All you have to do is call 1-800-799-SAFE. We're here for you.
Such a beautiful message from a war hero. I thank you for your service. Thank you, JR, for that. And here is Laura's story.
Laura White. I am a 10-year survivor from an abusive relationship. I didn't know that I was in an abusive relationship because I thought abuse had to be physical. It was always verbal, emotional, mental, spiritual, financial. When I finally decided to leave him after 6 years, that's when it turned physical. When I was in that relationship with him, I kept having what I thought was hopes that it was going to get better, hope that with time he would stop treating me that way. And I can look back now at that relationship and where I was, and I realized that wasn't hope I was feeling, that was hopelessness. Over on this side of what I went through, I have so much hope for the future. I have so much hope for my life and what I can do, and for my children and my grandchildren. Once I made that first phone call, it gave me the courage to make the second and the third. It gave me the courage to go out and get help. Please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. There are advocates standing by.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that story, Laura. Much appreciated. These are great people who come forward. And now it's Tommy's story.
I'm Tommy Vincent, and I am a domestic violence survivor. I understand that coming out of a domestic violence relationship is not easy. You carry shame, you carry guilt, you carry the burden as if you are the reason why you are in that relationship. I'm here to tell you that that is not the truth. I survived a relationship that ended with me in a position where I never thought I would see another day. When you finally are able to take a breath and share your story, your life immediately transforms. There are advocates standing by, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Even if you just have questions and you're not quite ready to share your story, or even if you want to call in and speak on behalf of someone else, they are available to talk to you and to give you guidance and help you get to the other side. I want you to know that you are loved, that you are special, and that it is not your fault. The call is toll free, 1-800-799-SAFE. It's time for everyone to allow for their voices to be heard.
What a beautiful message. I queued up those 3 videos because I thought they were so clear and evident and so important. 1-800-799-SAFE. And we're going to put that, again, that banner is going to be down on the bottom of your screen here. Again, I'm no expert at domestic violence prevention and awareness, but I am here with my platform to try to send a message, to get a message out there to anyone who needs help. If you need help, there is help there for you. You need to reach out to the folks. And for those of you who hear something, say something. I have a story of a neighbor in my previous residence who had a violent husband. I heard something, and not just because I was a police officer, but because I was a good human being. I went over and knocked on the door and offered my assistance. It could be the difference between life and death in these situations. And I think if you do see something that doesn't look right, you need to say something and take action. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the hero and step in. But by calling 911 and calling the authorities, or calling somebody to come and help that person, you're doing your job. You're doing what your human responsibility is. Let me read this super chat from Heidi Lee. She's a good friend. She sends in a $20 super chat and says, over 1,000 people here watching, listening, learning, sharing, and so much of us have our story. Thank you for providing a safe place, DutyRon, and your guests. Heidi, I love you. Thank you so much for that message. And I wanted, if it's okay with my esteemed guests here, I want to go to the chat and ask folks if they have questions for Connie or Donna. So I'm going to go to the chat quickly. I know, Ed, you and I are used to dealing with forensics and criminal parts of this. It's for us. It's just an important thing for us to talk about. And I want to just go to the chat and see if anybody has anything for our guests. Kelly Mai sends in a super chat and says, more needs to be done to end domestic violence. Help those who need it. Step up, make a difference. Amen. Amen to that. I mean, I can't overemphasize the importance of this. Jennifer Nobles says, thank you for doing this segment. It's so important. Amen, sister. I got you. Anybody with questions for Connie or Donna? I'm looking at the chat right now. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, I did hear about that. Well, let's put that back up. Everyone hear about the sexual assault attack on public transportation with people around watching. Ed, you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, that was in Philadelphia, and it was on a subway. It was a rape with the people around, and no one lifted a finger to stop it. The suspect was arrested, but it went on for several minutes in front of all these people. And they basically became voyeurs and took out their phones and videotaped it, but no one called 911.
Jesus. You know, and taping it is not the most important part. It is actually important to tape it, but you got to take action. Terrible situation.
I do have a question, Ron.
Okay.
If maybe Donna can or
Connie.
Connie could ask, what are some of the warning signs of an abuser? I mean, some of their characteristics that, you should be on the lookout for, that you might be in a relationship with someone who has tendencies to abuse. Donna, would you want to give you some of your experience?
Well, speaking to victims and handling it from the patrol perspective, rather, victims coming in that are violently attacked or manipulated. Some of the warning signs are total control over where they can go, who they can talk to, why are they leaving the house, why are they dressing in a provocative way, why don't they stay home more, questioning their intelligence levels, attacking them for the way they may look, overweight, underweight, not attractive enough, losing their beauty. Things that happen, just with the course of time in a relationship, calling them being jealous, attacking them for not being honest. And these are, once again, they're not cookie cutter answers, and they are not for every situation. They can vary, especially in teen dating violence. I just want to mention teen dating violence in dating relationships. Young people, such as Gabby, a young woman who was an adventurous soul, got in a van with someone she loved and she thought loved him. They loved each other, rather. And that there probably were a lot of early warning signals that went unnoticed, or some of the things that she found to be flattering. Maybe he was a little jealous of her. Maybe they were taking time in this relationship to build on their relationship, to get over some of the problems that they might have been experiencing. So, red flags don't always present themselves initially. Sometimes, things get caught up in the moment of feeling love for someone, feeling different feelings that they've never felt at a certain age, the maturity level that the two people have in the relationship. So it's really, as I said before, a mixed bag of a lot of things, and they're not all in every relationship. Some of them are particles that are in relationships, and it really is on a relationship by relationship basis.
Well, it sounds like what you were saying in a lot of the categories that you were listing, it seems like they all circle around power and control.
There's no doubt power and control is the basis for it, but it's also a learned behavior.
Right.
My father was battered. He learned that behavior. He perpetrated it on his family. I learned that behavior. I didn't always walk the right path either in life because of that. And also it can be cultural. It could be indigenous within the culture that person lives as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Connie, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some subtleties too, right? Sometimes it's the tone of voice, right? Sometimes you'll find someone speaking snarky, or you'll hear like it's very sharp, almost disrespectful, but you rationalize it to be something otherwise. Many times the tone of voice comes off very authoritative. And some people feel like, oh, he really cares. He really loves me. I mean, whatever that translation is. But sometimes it's not as overt. And I think it is those subtleties that we oftentimes dismiss because, oh, maybe he's just having an off day, or maybe she's just having an off day. And usually that's not it, right? Because you usually feel that. And I think we ignore that gut feeling that says something feels off, something doesn't feel right with this exchange. And so, what I would caution folks to do is just be mindful of those things that we may want to dismiss, or we may want to rationalize as something else, right? Like, as Donna mentioned, like, the woman who goes out and she may be wearing something that she doesn't think is provocative, but he does, right? What is that exchange? What's being spoken in that exchange, right? Because the self-worthiness is a big deal. And what we have to realize is that oftentimes these abusers are eroding the self-esteem of the person they're abusing little by little. And sometimes it's that slight comment about something you wore, or about the weight you gained or the weight you lost, right? It's, oh, your makeup. It's all these things that we think are inconsequential in the moment, but as as we mentally process that, and we start thinking less of ourselves, this behavior becomes acceptable. And then over time, yes, he or she can do even more things, right? Like, because then the level of control begins to escalate, or the violence will begin to escalate, because you've accepted everything else so far, and you've been able to rationalize everything else so far. And so now here's the point where it's almost like, wow, how did I get here? And many times they don't know how to get out of that. And so I would just pay attention to those things that seem inconsequential. They seem a little subtle, right? Like, oh, no big deal. Over time, that's when you see that it is a big deal.
Wow. Thank you for that, Connie and Donna. Now we're at the hour mark, and it's going to be difficult for us to continue on with a lot more of this. But there's a message in the chat, and here's a super chat that came up. It goes to Connie and Donna. It says, "What about elder abuse that continues in elder senior care homes? Question mark, question mark. Who defends them?" I have a story about that. Okay. Before I let the ladies tackle this one, my own aunt was in a skilled care facility recovering from cancer surgery. And she was one of the aides that was inside there bathing her, opened up the window in the wintertime here in New York and put cold water on her and bathed her with the window open. I came in to visit her in the morning, and she was visibly shaken. There was something very wrong with her. And I went straight to the administrator of the facility after she told me that. Now, remember, at that time, I was a retired detective. I wasn't active, but I still have my shield, and I still have my dupe with me. I still carry my dupe. I still have my ID card with me. I still, and this is my aunt. So I flipped out and went storming into the office, and they said, "Oh, you need an appointment." I said, I don't need an appointment. I want to talk to and I went in there and I advocated for her, and I had that administrator immediately address that situation. And I told my aunt that she was going to be safe, that I was going to stay there with her. But had I not been there, had I did not come to visit her, her phone wasn't even working. Her cell phone was out. The charge, the battery was dead. I charged up the phone for her. She was visibly shaken. I got her transferred out of that facility, and the aide was released, was fired on the spot. But again, there's so many of these stories that we have going on. There's stories that are horrific, that we could sit here all night and talk about these things, but it is just, if there's not somebody there to be an advocate for these seniors. Some of them can't speak. Some of them are incapacitated to where they can't communicate. That's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother live stream that we could talk about. Donna, do you want to take that? Because this question was directed at both you ladies, but I just wanted to tell my personal story about that.
In the state of New Jersey, and all states have laws that protect elder abuse, and also elder abuse against the elderly in a home situation, and that is a home, which is considered their household because that's where they live as elders, is protected in New Jersey under the New Jersey Domestic Violence Prevention Act. So you can be charged criminally,
right,
civilly, and then criminally as well. Under the state Domestic Violence Act would be civilly and then criminally. So there are laws in place, but you're absolutely right. Someone has to advocate, and it's important that within that family, if there's a family for the person who is in the home, that someone be in charge of pursuing the charges, or a power of attorney for the elder in the home, to be their advocate as well. And that's what we do in the state of New Jersey.
Connie, any words on that for New York?
Yeah, I think, all too often, I don't want to say in all cases, people are kind of setting it and forget it with the elderly, but like they do need an advocate, right? And so, going straight to the head person, right? Because as an administrator, you can't ignore that the family just said there has been some level of abuse to their loved one, right? It really doesn't even matter what the relationship is, but if something has been reported, they have an obligation to be responsive to what was reported. And so, so me having had a grandmother who was in a nursing home, she'd tell us something happened. My mother and I are both up there, right? I mean, it could be just sort of the New York character in us, right? Or it could just be, this is someone who she may not be able to get up and move on her own, but she's of sound mind. She's of, she can still tell us what's happening, right? And so we, I think, as just individuals, have to be good stewards of those who are growing old and who can no longer function as independently as they had in the past. And it's our responsibility to go and advocate and speak up, because many times when they try to do it on their own, the abuse continues or it escalates. So sometimes having that external person to be the heavy and I think, as Donna said, someone who's going to follow through. Right. Like, you made the complaint, but who's going to go make sure that the issue was addressed?
I followed through, Connie. And had I not been there, my aunt was scared. She told me, they're going to beat me.
Right.
They're going to beat me the next night. Well, what I did is I went one step further, because of course, by the time I came in, the midnight overnight people were not there anymore. So I said to that administrator, I will be back here. When is her next shift? And he said, I'm calling her in for this 4 to 12 shift. She's coming. I was there early in the morning. I think he called her in at noon. So I was still there, and she came in, and I went in the office with him after he talked to her first. But then I went in the office there, and I heard what he said to her. He actually terminated her, and he was explaining to me that some of the workers are they have a union, or there's some type of thing that protects them from this or something. I don't know. I was out in Suffolk County, so it was a different county. It wasn't New York City. It was a Suffolk County case, but the person was terminated. And I said to my aunt, because she was begging me not to leave her there, because she said to get me out of here. She was petrified. We wound up getting her transferred out of there. We did what we had to do, but it took a day or two. So she wanted me to sleep there with her. She wanted me to stay there and sleep outside the door. And I told her I would, but her daughter came. That was my aunt, my mother's sister, and her daughter came, and she stayed there with her. And the administrator allowed it because she wouldn't stay there. My aunt was petrified. So yeah, that's just another story that we have going on. Listen, it's an hour and 10 minutes in. I appreciate each and every one of you. Donna, I have your website. We're going to link that in the description. DonnaRomanHernandez.com. She has all of the links to all of her resources and her media. Do you want to anything else you want to plug? The book is coming out. You want to talk about that?
Well, thank you. So my memoir, Battered Blue. Sorry, the light went out on my computer here.
You can still see.
It's a memoir that I promised my mother before she died that I would write on behalf of the both of us. And it's a journey through over 30 years of domestic violence in the household. But it's not only about the journey, it's about the lessons that I've learned. And hopefully it will bring the awareness piece to why people stay, why people don't discuss it, and things of that nature. It's been in the works for a number of years, and it will probably be released in the new year. And thank you for this opportunity, to share some of my thoughts with your audience. It's really much appreciated. And thank you for doing a show like this, which is really needed.
It's my pleasure. I mean, I'm going to do many more shows like this. So please, if you can, would you come back and have more conversations with us to continue this in the future? Connie and Donna, I want you guys to come back. Connie, you have some books. I know I have a cheat sheet on you. It's right here. So my cheat sheet says that you are the instructor and founder, 20 years in health services and corrections, Rikers Island Civilians Corrections Academy. You worked at AMKC, GMDC, OBCC, C95. You got around. Author of The Cage was a Cocoon. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So The Cage Was a Cocoon really is just the backdrop of me working in corrections for 20 years. And all of the lessons learned. When I started in 2000, I was in my 20s. And, I thought I knew about the world until I started working with this element that I had no idea what was what. But also, too, what are all the lessons learned, the journey, the just leading to becoming a businesswoman, right? Like you say, you want to be an entrepreneur, but what does it take in order for you to get there? So a lot of getting out of my own way, teaching myself new skills and building on that. But along the way, just providing service. So having served the domestic violence population, the inmate population, I continue to now serve in, the corrections capacity, training non-uniformed employees who go to work in the correctional environment and trying to make sure that they have safe and successful careers. A lot of times we don't get through the academy training. We may get some exposure, but some states, they don't have the ability or they don't see the need. And so now providing that resources so that civilians can go in and not only just do their job, but also contribute to the safety and security of the environment and really establishing a partnership with custody. So there's a lot of all goodness stuff going on, but I'm having a good time. And thank you, Jalene, who says I look like I'm 28. Thank you.
I tell you, Connie, when you come on, it's a whole bowl of goodness, and everybody sees all the great information and all the great experience you have to share with us. I don't have to ask you because I know you will come back, but you are
sure, I'll be back.
You're always welcome on Crime Time with DutyRon. I freaking love you. I think you're awesome. I can't wait to one day get together with you and Anthony so we can have a sit down and have some laughs together because I think we would have a really great time.
We would.
Yeah, breaking some bread together. So I want to just say thank you to Ed Wallace. We have something to talk about. What's happening on Thursday this week, Ed?
Okay, folks. We have your forensic anthropologist. It's all scheduled, and he's from the Body Farm, Dr. Murray Marks. He was my instructor at when I entered the Body Farm training, and he's graciously accepted our invitation to come speak to you all about all things forensics and the anthropology and the Body Farm on Thursday at 9 o'clock.
That's
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock on Thursday. I'm going to schedule it. We are going to have a forensic anthropologist to talk about Brian Laundrie and his remains. I have the ladies backstage because Ed and I we just want to talk about this quickly. That's going to be a live that you're not going to want to miss because it's going to be so informative. Not only are we going to talk about Brian Laundrie and his the anthropology studies, we're going to talk about the body farm and some of the research and some of the history of that location. There's so many videos on it on YouTube. I encourage you guys to go over and watch those videos. If you are squeamish and you don't want to look at dead human remains, don't go and watch them. I'm not going to show them on my live, but I'm telling you, the research and the amount of learning that goes on at the body farm is just unbelievable. And Ed, I thank you for getting that guest. It took us, I don't want to jinx it, but it took us a long time to get a forensic anthropologist on here.
They're so busy.
Yeah, they are busy. And you know what? They got a lot of work to do. So us civilians, we're just sometimes a nuisance to them, but they do like to talk. So I want to get them on and talk about their craft. So on behalf of myself and Ed Wallace, I want to thank my two guests, Donna Roman Hernandez, Connie from the Civilian Corrections Academy. I don't dare say your last name because if I get it wrong, you'll kick my ass. So it's Eileen.
Yep. See, you didn't do it bad. You did it justice.
No, I got it right. Jennifer Nobles is in the chat. Roro is here from Bakersfield, California. Where are the boys? Those are our boys, Orrin and Orson West. Sincere and Classic. We are going to cover Summerwell's case. We're going to talk about a lot of different things going down the road. So as I like to end all of these live streams, God bless the world. God bless the United States of America. And God bless each and every one of us here in the chat and all victims of crime from the domestic side and their families across our globe. Good night from New York City. I believe another state. I don't want to give up Connie's location because everyone will be knocking at her door. She's adorable. And Donna, I'm not going to give up her location either because she's equally as adorable. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Ed. Any final words, Ed?
It was a great show. Thank you, ladies, again for getting out this information. People in abusive relationships, there is help for you. You don't have to stay in that relationship. Seek out a trusted friend. Get to law enforcement. We're here to help you.
Amen to that, brother. All right, guys, good night, and thank you for joining. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Good night.